Hello and welcome back. And I remember a time, not so long ago, that I was so pumped about this device, the Synology DS1525 Plus, the follow-up to the DS1522 Plus. I'm cool and available at parties. This was a 5-bay 10G expandable, well-equipped piece of hardware that would, from the Synology portfolio, when you looked at everything else in the market, it hit the nail on the head in terms of storage, in terms of performance, in terms of network connectivity. And now, in the 2025 generation, this is a device that should be popular, should be exactly what you need, if it wasn't for one little thing. I think you know what it is, but we'll get to that later. But, real quick, the too long didn't watch on this. This is a 5-bay Synology-equipped system. By Synology-equipped, I mean DSM, Disk Station Manager, still, at least in my opinion, the best NAS software in the market right now, in terms of usability, in terms of features and function, in terms of security, pretty much across the board. It doesn't tick every single box, but it ticks most of them for most users, and there's a reason why Synology are still kind of seen as the king of the hill in terms of NAS software, at least in terms of the business, and even the Soho and even some early kind of mid-SMB sectors still to this day. Now, this system equipped with a 4-core, 8-thread AMD embedded Ryzen CPU. That is right, no integrated graphics, no quick sync, none of the hardware transcoding, anything like that. This is a file processing focused CPU, and one of the reasons they've gone for that CPU has been the support of ECC. This device arrives with 8 gig of ECC SODIMM DDR4 memory, expandable up to 32 gig. Alongside the 5 hard drive bays, you've also got 2 M.2 NVMe bays, which, if you're lucky, can take advantage of caching and storage pools as well. Yes, we'll get to that as well. Now, in terms of changes between this and the previous generation, probably the biggest gig in town there is now 2.5 GBE. The previous iteration device had 4 1 gig Ethernet ports there. So Synology giveth, Synology taketh away there. You may also have noticed this device also supports the 10G upgrade there via PCIe. So this is always seen for a lot of users, at least in terms of the balance between feature set and hardware, at least in Synology terms, probably one of the best options in the market. Rocking out at $799. It's actually about $30–40 more expensive from what I've seen when the 1522 was launched. But then all of Synology solutions have seemingly gone up in price, both old and current gen, by the way, if you look around. Now, whether that is preemptive stuff against this tariff nonsense or just simply the brand marking things up, old versus new, there's a lot of theories. But still, nonetheless, at $799, this is a little bit more pricey than what we've seen. But again, inflation, whatever. So, design. Design, realistically, on this is still as good as ever. It is a plastic chassis, but everything from the click and load trays, which are incredibly streamlined and easy to use. Alongside that, again, accessing the M.2s. The whole thing is effectively toolless unless you're going to use 2.5-inch SATA. And we'll get onto noise and temperatures and power consumption and stuff later on, but I've always loved the Synology design of the ventilation there. It's a plastic chassis, metal on the inside there. Even the dual fans on the rear, which have got 3 different cooling settings. Again, we'll go through that later on during the noise testing. It's a very well put together device. It always has been. It feels a little plasticky sometimes, but to be honest, you're never going to be lifting it, and it actually looks pretty easy on the eyes as well. But what about temperatures? This thing's going to be on 24/7 for days, weeks, years at a time. You don't want it to melt through the table. Well, we had the whole thing populated with Synology's own 4TB HET 5300 hard drives for reasons, and on top of that we had a couple of Synology M.2 NVMes in storage pools at the bottom, again for reasons. So we had the device set up, and in terms of temperature, after 24 hours of the system being intermittently accessed every 20 minutes over a 24-hour period, we saw temperatures of between 38 to 43 around the sides, a little higher on the side where the CPU was joining a sister board there, but overall that's not too bad for that amount of storage media being intermittently accessed there. Now, on the base of the system, it's worth highlighting that these M.2 NVMe slots are actually Gen 3 x 4. We tapped in as best we could via SSH. It doesn't have the very clear labeling if you go in with a part description there via terminal. They're 3 x 4, but at the same time, we only saw temperatures peaking at 65 to 70 degrees. Now, that's because despite these being 3 x 4, the SSD Synology's own M.2 NVMes, the SNV3400, these only reach a maximum write speed of about 750 megabytes per second. They're based more on endurance. There is a power loss protection version, by the way, which I don't think fit inside this. But still, I wasn't too worried about the temperature of those drives given that write speed anyway, and the thermals kind of played that out. Likewise, one of the reasons I've always been in love with this chassis from Synology is because of noise. Because unless you use balmy, massive drives, noise isn't going to be the biggest hurdle here. Now, we had the device set up in 4 different noise configurations, which hopefully you can see on screen now. Now you can see there, when we have the fan set to low, with the 5 drives inside, pretty much in idle, we saw noise levels of around 36 to 39 dBA, the odd intermittent spike there from surrounding noise. Mid, and that's cool mode, where the fans go up just a wee bit there, and they're not set to automatically adjust, then the noise level hit around 37 to 40, once again with the drives in idle. Finally, at high, that was the fans on the NAS set all the way to the highest without any drive noise. We saw audible levels of around 43 to 45 dBA. Again, not a hugely scientific experimentation, but it gives you some understanding of the varying differences. Finally, with the drives on active and the drives being accessed, all of them simultaneously with the fans being on the highest, we saw around 52 to 55 dBA. And so that's pretty much peak if you're going to go for 7200 drives. If you were using drives larger than, say, 12 TB, they're going to make a bit more noise. And at that point, the noise of the drives during heavy access is going to be louder than the box fans itself. But at that point, you shouldn't be in close proximity. And there's nothing any brand can do about that, short of packing the device in rubber, which temperature-wise would be a no-no. Now, power consumption on the device is something that is kind of a mixed bag because of that CPU they've gone for. The V1500B is a CPU Synology have been using a lot of their SMB systems since 2020, and it isn't as power efficient in terms of, you know, baseline TDP and clock compared with that of a lot of the Celerons in the market that they used to use in the olden days. The result is that in all 4 different power tests, there wasn't the base low line we've kind of got used to with a lot of efficient compact systems. To put that into perspective, with no hard drives inside and no 10G connection active, so that's a system in full CPU idle doing nothing, the lowest we saw was 16.7 to 16.8 watts. That's idle. That's as low as it's going to go. Yes, you can go into super hibernation or use scheduled on and off, but that is as low as it's going to get really with the system on and ready. Now, when I had hard drives inside in idle and the 10G connection connected via that adapter, which cost around $130 to $150, everything in idle, it reached 41 to 42. And again, that was with 5 4TB drives inside. In terms of power consumption watts. Now, with write activity happening across all of the drives and 10GBE connection, we saw power consumption there of around 60 to 68 watts. So that was with the CPU there, sitting at around 10 to 20% up and, intermittently. And finally, when I removed the hard drives from the equation and only accessed the SSDs inside via 10GBE, we saw a power consumption of around 53 to 58, which is actually pretty high. The CPU perked up quite significantly, but it was still 5 drives sitting in idle, not being accessed. Overall, the point I'm making is, this is a system with a lot of file processing readiness there, but if you're incredibly conscious of power consumption, there are a lot of more efficient CPUs in the market right now, or more compact systems, from Synology themselves, I might add, that are going to consume less power. And if you're that power conscious, the old Lecky bill, or just climate, then maybe think about going for something else. Next up, I said we'd come to it. I mean, I'd love to talk about the USB connections on this. They're all 5 gig, and Synology have pretty much reduced USB connectivity on this to UPSs and storage drives only. You can't really use any accessories anymore on those. And I'd like to talk a little bit perhaps about the expandability, the fact that you can add 10 more drives via 2 $350 to $450 5-bay expansions from Synology. Again, I'm going to have to explore that more when I've got the expansion, because I'm still unsure about their transition from yes, outdated eSATA at 6 gigabits per second versus that of more modern Type-C at 5 gigabits per second, and whether that carries over very, very well. But the main thing I want to talk about is network connectivity there. Now, yes, it's great. We can add that 10 gig connection. This is because I've added that adapter. You have to pay extra for this adapter. But the 2 times 2.5 gigabit Ethernet is something of a mixed bag. Because one, I'm absolutely thrilled that Synology have decided to join us in 2025 with 2.5 gig bin. Most systems have had it now since 2020. But at the same time, one of the appeals of the original version of the previous generation, 1522 Plus, had 4 1 gig ports. You lagged them together or used SMB multi-channel. Yes, it was messy, but you still had 4 gigabit Ethernet. But more importantly, you had a bunch of failover. This, on the other hand, does give you more bandwidth at 2 times 2.5 GBE, and you will have to make sure you have got a 2.5 GBE switch or a 10 gig switch with auto negotiation. But still, I quite liked having 4 ports there. And I know people are going to be thinking I'm a Goldilocks going, this porridge is too hot, this porridge is too cold. But it's a weird, it feels like I haven't really gained as much as I should have. Why this couldn't have arrived with 4 2.5 gig ports? I think that CPU there has got enough lanes to allow that to happen. And the fact that this has got, from what I could see, no scale down of those M.2s from 3.4 when their own SSDs are never going to hit that performance threshold. But on read, certainly, but not on write. I think there would have been an argument to, play around, get rid of some of the other USBs that Synology don't really support anymore, and allow this to have those 4 1 gig ports and maintain that. There definitely could have been a way to do it. I think this is more about them reusing an existing architecture more than it is innovating across those network ports. So I'm pleased that they are on there, but it's not as big a jump as I would have liked to have seen. Now, for those that are interested in performance, we had 5 hard drives inside in an SHR. We connected to the device via that 10G connection on the rear that I added with that optional 10 gig port there. I also used a Unify USB 4 to 10 gig connected accessory there. And I saw the hard drives reaching speeds of 900 over 800. Now, again, my read speed was hampered, I will say, by my client system, my Windows machine, using OBS. And I should have used an external adapter to do it. And I will be returning to the performance because of this and the 1825 very, very soon. And I'm using a third-party system with an external capture card. It's going to be fine. But I just wanted to highlight it there because it was the write I was really interested in more than the read. And I was pleased with what I saw there in the SHR using Synology drives there, those 7200 RPM drives. That was important because you get a higher rotational speed there to reach and try to saturate a 10G connection, albeit using optional methods. I will say this is going to saturate those 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports really easily. I tested it vaguely. I didn't really go into much detail. That CPU's got the oomph, it's got the ECC, it's fine. When it came to the M.2 NVMEs on the base, however, again, as mentioned, because the SSDs that Synology have at the moment only hit 750 write, they hit 3000 and above read. When I had them in a RAID 0 pool, I saw that 1000 getting hit, and I saw 800 being hit. Again, my capture on my local machine being something of a bottleneck. But it still meant that I didn't feel like I was reaching my full potential on those M.2s. And indeed, they're in a RAID 0. Maybe if I'd done them in a RAID 1, it would have increased some of that read-write. But the 10G connection I was running through into this, one of those M.2s or 2 of those M.2s, I should have seen 1000 up and down easily, even with my overhead there. And it was just another example of those SSDs that they're supplying, like not really being about performance. They're about durability and they're about read and for caching, but as a storage pool drive, they are not fantastic. And of course, that wouldn't be a problem, would it? If I could use other drives, it would be great. If I could use other drives, that's right, let's rip the plaster off. As much as I want to like this system, I think we can all agree that the change in policy by Synology with regards to support of hard drives is at best baffling and at worst aggressively terrible. Now, what do I mean by that? Right now, if you go to the Synology compatibility listings for this device, and indeed the majority of 2025 generation devices at the time of recording, the 3rd week of July 2025, you can only use Synology hard drives. You can only use Synology SSDs right now. Now, there are exceptions to that rule that we'll get onto in a moment, but it means that if you buy this, you have to use Synology's own hard drives. Now, when it comes to their value series of drives, these are actually reasonably priced. I will say in the majority of regions of the world, these are relatively easy to come by and actually comparable in price to the majority of Seagate OWD drives in the market. However, after that, it all falls apart. Because if you want to go for the enterprise grade drives, and by enterprise, by the way, I mean their 7200 RPM drives, Pro series drives, or that kind of stuff. These drives, the pricing is bonkers. We did a whole dedicated video on this, and not only is the pricing bonkers, availability is bonkers. And rolling out an entire series of devices where you can only use their drives when one of your premier drive options there is sort of all over the place is whacked. It is wrong. It is not on. And if you do want to use third-party drives, here's the rub. If you want to use third-party drives, if you want to use the Seagate Iron Wolf drives, if you want to use the WD Red drives, you can't even initialize this system unless those drives have appeared on the compatibility listings, which right now at 67 days since the launch of some of these systems, I have been keeping track because I'm cool, they're still not on there. The result is you can't use those drives, you can't initialize the system, and when you do set up the system with third-party drives, in the rare occasions you can, such as SATA SSDs, by the way, which for some reason you can initialize the system all the way through to initializing the storage media for some reason, even though Synology have got their own SATA SSDs. If you do that, then you still get warnings all over the place. Let's say you're migrating away from an old Synology NAS and you want to migrate over your drives to this system. It'll let you. You can take your Seagate or WD drives that are inside this system right here, pop them in this, and it will see those drives. It will allow you to continue. It will allow you to keep your existing pool. But you can't expand. You can't add a hot spare. You can't even RAID rebuild. That means that you take your drives from your existing Synology system, you put them over here, you use those services, and once those drive, in the event of one of those drives dying, and you have to put in a replacement, unless those drives have been added to Synology's compatibility list, which the brand does say, they are talking to WD, they're talking with Seagate, they've offloaded the work and compatibility over to them, and it's taking time. Why it needed to be done in the first place, we can debate till the end of time. But if you migrate those drives over, and one of them dies, at the moment you have to buy a Synology drive to save your RAID. You have to introduce a drive that is different to the rest of your pool, which, again, there is SHR, that's great, but you still have to use one of their drives in order to recover it, or add a hot spare, or to just expand. That is artificial limitation. That is something I'm not on board with. Either don't let people migrate over, or let them migrate over and let them keep using their drives. This middle thing feels bad. And I'm not even going to go into how much I'm wound up by the idea that right now, their own SSDs, they don't have a high-performance SSD available to me in the market right now, but I can get a system where I can create M.2 NVMe storage pools for higher performance tiered storage, but then I can only use their drives that only give me 750 megabytes per second. So now let's talk about the software. So Synology's DSM platform, let's be realistic, I mentioned it in the intro, it's the best in the biz. It is still fantastic. It is the reason why I think a lot of users are so wound up about Synology's change in support. Now, Synology have made arguments across the board about why they need to keep their software and their services as secure and stable as possible, and there are going to be users that are prepared to overlook the change in hard drive policy by the brand because the software is that good, that reliable. They buy these systems not for the hardware, not for the network ports, not for the hard drive compatibility. They buy it literally for the software. The software is worth the price of admission to these users. Whether it is active backup supporting, again, third-party SaaS and PaaS services, whether it is their virtual machine platform, whether it is surveillance station, which is still an absolute banger, whether it is the migration and office tools from Hyper Backup to Synology Office to Synology Chat and more, whether it is users buying this platform due to its kind of closed network nature of client devices and encryption. Ultimately, the software on this still runs like an absolute dreamboat. And it's just a shame that right now in 2025, we are talking about a brand with phenomenal software, which seems to be going down the lock-in route. I still love DSM and I will still continue to recommend DSM, but with that big caveat that this system, for as much as I like it, because it is a good system by the way, Great stability, great software, incredible security, I might add, with one of the best track records in the market right now in terms of their dedication towards supporting white hat hackers and investigating vulnerabilities in their own system. Again, I can't fault them for that. I just don't like the idea of recommending it to everyone, software that once you're getting in, it's actually a lot harder to get out. Bottom line, can I recommend this system? I can, but not to everyone. The software, for many, as said, is going to be worth the price of admission. I love the software. I think it does an incredible job, and what it offers is better than everyone else in the market right now if you don't know what you are doing or you don't want to heavily rely on a sysadmin to get the job done. If you've got someone on your payroll, then maybe you can look around at something ZFS-based perhaps. But if you want flexibility in your deployment, if you want to know that you're buying into a system that you can get out of easily down the road, this might not be one for you. If you were looking at trying to save a bit of bunts, there are options like the 925 Plus, for example, small scale. You can't upgrade it to the same degree, but it is a more affordable option. I would say until Synology expedite hard drive compatibility, I recommend this, but double check that compatibility list. I think drives are going to arrive on there. I really, really do. I don't think there's going to be many, and we're going to analyze the hell out of the ones that are. But until those drives are added, if you're not in love with the software, go over to Synology's DSN website. You can actually do a demo of it. I'll link to it in the description below. If you're not in love with that software, sit on the fence a wee bit longer. And if you are upgrading your existing Synology NAS, maybe check that compatibility before you do anything else. It's a good system, but it is muddied by a hard drive policy that I just find perplexing and baffling. But what do you guys think? It's going to be very easy to imagine in the comments there'll be a bunch of people flaming Synology about the hard drive compatibility, and although it's great to talk about that and hopefully it makes the brand change, I would like to talk to people in the comments who are looking at solutions like this and who are thinking about overlooking that hard drive compatibility, or are thinking, do you know what, I actually support that kind of rigorous gate control of drives on this system. There are arguments back and forth, and I'd love to talk to you in the comments to get a better, broader understanding. But it's going to be great to talk to everyone anyway. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know if you have. If you found this video helpful, and if you want to get hold of this device from the retailers linked in the description, please use those links in order to do so. Using those links will result in a small commission on anything you buy coming to here at NAS Compares, and it allows me and Eddie to keep doing what we do. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.